Now, finally, well, it's a pleasure to have you, Peter. Now we can be official. Welcome to our course.
Thank you.
Can I say a few words, nice words about you? So how we met. So I went to Brisbane. It was like 2013, and I was working with transit-oriented development. And then Peter came and said, "Are you working with transit-oriented?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm working." And he said, "I'm the top Australian urban transit-oriented development urban designer." And then we had a long chat about transit-oriented development, and it was at QUT, Queensland University of Technology. So you were teaching there for many years, and you have your practice in Fortitude Valley. Fortitude Valley is the most hipster part of Brisbane. It's like Sodermount of Brisbane. It's a fantastic place. And you have a studio there, architectural and urban design studio, which is a fantastic place. And Peter is the most passionate advocate for urban sketching. It's a real pleasure to have him around sketching, and it's fantastic having you here in the course, Peter. And I'll leave the floor to you. It's a pleasure. I'm going to enjoy it here. Sit on the corner and enjoy it. Presentation.
Thanks, everybody. It's a bit hard to have very interactive, I guess, because I can't really see any of you. And but Todor, if there's any questions, people put their hand up. We can maybe pause. I've got a lot to go through, as you know, and I know you've got a busy day ahead of you. So I'll just launch into it. And so I'm in 2004. Well, I'll go back even further. When I was a student still, I remember being told by someone, you should do drawings that explain your thinking about the project, not just show the project, you know, explain why the project is the way it is. And that struck a chord with me. And I like to draw, and I like to draw a lot, and I like to draw to flesh out the design aspect. So, and as a young architect, I was also very interested in urban design and what cities meant. And it's nice to see Gordon Cullen's drawings, who's an absolute master. Todor just showed you before. He was certainly an influence of mine, and we all wanted to draw like Gordon and write like him as well. And none of us can do that really, but we make do with what we have. But so I drew a lot, and in 2004 I decided I'd worked enough to sort of want to record some of the drawings I'd done. I kept the drawings. A lot of the drawings you'll see today are drawings that aren't finished drawings of the design. They're the drawings of the process of design, plus also the urban sketching, which I'll talk about as well. So I coined this term called design thinking drawing, and funnily enough, no one else in the world has this term. So if you Google it, you'll find me. But the idea that you express design thinking through drawing, and the natural extension of sort of urban sketching, urban observation through drawing, the urban sketching, is really to do analysis, urban analysis. It's about recording places, but an urban analysis. So so bear with me. I'll see how all this comes together. My presentation's not moving, which is not good. Dear, just a second. I'm pushing the button and it's not wanting to move. I'll try this again. There we go. So I'm an urban designer and architect. I founded Dokie Richards in 1994, which is many years ago now. Oops, that's a bit quick. I've stood down as a director in recent times to help with succession planning, but I've taught a lot, as Todor said. So why draw? And it's a simple question, I think, and a nice question. And for me, it just helps me do my job and enjoy the job. It allows me to be effective with work and communicate with others. And it's a very enjoyable process. So those drawings you can see on the right-hand side are all drawings from practice. Some of them you can see I'm sitting around tables talking to people, and I do a lot of that kind of work, design workshops and the like, where you're engaging with people and talking about design issues and ideas. You're doing plans, perspectives, and little vignette perspectives and analysis diagrams. But drawing, to me, is about recording insights of the place and urbanism. And looking at the drawing, you'll see some in a minute. Insights about urbanism and the place, the relationship of the place to landform, the increments of development, the notions of urban grain are really important to me. One of the nicest things about traditional urban places that we all know and love is they're very fine grained. They're not full of big lumps of buildings. And they create an urban context, whether that's streets or plazas or walkways. I like urban transformation. You know, places change, and the contrast between a modern building and an older building, or even buildings of 1930s compared to 1890 is quite interesting, because, you know, architectural thinking and styles change over time. I'm really interested in this, in a way, is about serial vision to some extent. Is, does the environment invite you to explore it? I think that's a really powerful concept. So when you're at a place, is there enough in the place to want to explore and walk down the street, go around a corner? And often that relates to the idea of invitations and glimpses, narrow openings and views through doorways, archways, around corners, narrow streets looking down to the water. And of course, urban places and buildings. I'm much more interested in places rather than buildings. So I'll probably draw two buildings together rather than one beautiful building. I draw sometimes one beautiful building, but typically I'm drawing a mix of buildings. Urban activity. So the way people use space is really important. And with urban sketching, you're sitting down in a place for 2 hours, that's the time scale, and you absorb, you watch, you talk to people. It's a perfect way to observe the way people use the environment. And you come to terms with the environment. You see the kinds of people wandering around. Are there children, older people, families, different abilities of people? What are they doing there? Where do they sit? Is there a cafe they're going to that's quite popular? You know, all of those things are really interesting. And basically, as a designer, we need to observe, we need to develop our critical observation skills as designers. So when we're looking at somewhere, we're actually looking carefully and deeply, I think, and trying to understand what the place is about and try to remember it. And Toto mentioned before sort of visual memory, but as designers, we need to kind of have a stock of memories in our head. Basically, you know, most things probably have been done. What's the perfect size for an urban plaza, for example, you know, depending on whether it's a civic quality or an incidental urban quality. But there's some plazas I've been to which I find particularly nice, and how wide are they? You know, and interestingly, my favorite plaza probably in any place is Plaza Alfalfa in Seville, which is 30 meters wide. It's also the width of the harbour at New Haven in Copenhagen, exactly 30 meters of water. So it's interesting how these numbers sort of come about. The other thing about drawing is you do it to get better at drawing, and also to enjoy yourself. So you can't not draw. So when I was much younger, I drew in pencil, and the left-hand drawing is a drawing in Venice in 1991. I'm sure many of you probably weren't born then. But I was in Venice and drawing a little sketchbook, which I still have. If I look, I'll probably find it in about 5 minutes. And when I started, then I had a break for 26 years, which seems slightly strange in hindsight, but I basically devoted my energies to drawing in the office. I would say to people, I like to draw things that don't exist rather than things that do exist. But certainly with urban sketching, I've begun to appreciate the drawing of things that do exist really helps you to create things that don't exist. So as an urban sketcher, I decided I wanted to learn new techniques and new tricks. And I've linked into the International Urban Sketching Movement, which is a movement of people. There's 330 groups around the world that they're free to go to. The nearest ones to you guys are probably in Malmo, Copenhagen. There's one in Stockholm. There's one outside of Stockholm. I forget the name of the city. I'm not sure the other ones are in Sweden. But it's a great excuse just to go and draw with people for 2 hours, and then you chat with them afterwards and share your work. And there's Facebook pages, all this, so you can just find it on Facebook. And International Urban Sketches and Instagram, and also on Facebook, but also on, well, mainly Facebook, I guess. They post, you know, lots and lots of drawings of people all over the world. So this is the range of things, and you can see there's colouring in pencil, there's Posca pens, which are acrylic paint pens. That night drawing is an iPad drawing. I'm doing a lot of iPad work now, and I use that in the office a lot. There's colouring in pencils, there's thin pens, there's ink lines with ink washes, there's watercolour, which I still find very challenging. The bottom left drawing on that page, My wife is from Norway, and I lived in Norway, and so that's south of Sandefjord, little cottages on the rocks. I'm quite proud of that drawing because there's not much architecture, lots of rocks. The bottom right is Amsterdam, and that's a paint first approach. So, you know, I'm just practicing different things. If you want a good representative view of Brisbane, it's the middle view on the left-hand side. Brisbane's a very hilly city with big, deep valleys, lots of small timber houses down the hills, very steep streets, and then views across the trees and that roof lines to the city itself. And that's Brisbane as well. The one second from on the bottom, second from the left, with the tall buildings and the boat in front. That's looking towards the city centre from a place called Howard Smith Wharves. But it goes on and on. Basically, I've I don't know how many sketches I've done in the last 5 or 6 years. Probably a couple of hundred, 300, 500, who knows, maybe more. And I scan them all, and I look at them from time to time. They're all on Instagram. If you want to find Instagram, we'll do that later on. But the top left one is Brisbane, next one along Sydney. That's my barbecue, drawn in lockdown. I go drawing the microbreweries, which is a nice thing to do. Have an ale, and there's a nice microbrewery I found in Karlskrona. It's got the beer is quite strong, though it's a bit stronger than what I can taste. It's sort of 8%, which is a bit much for me. But and then shops and rivers and things, and then interiors of antique stores. So there's a whole range of different techniques. I'm basically a line drawer. That's my key thing, and building up textures with lines, but I also build up textures with colouring in pencils. And also the two bottom ones are, the left-hand one of the two bottom ones is a memorial. It's a paint first one. So you put paint on the page, then you draw over the top of it, which is quite a nice way to make art. In more recent times, I've done workshops with white ink on black paper, and then charcoal, which is pretty difficult. Fatter pens on the top left. And then the bottom left is one done last week, which was, it's a Posca pen on a board. I'm trying to have an exhibition of drawings this year. So there's a whole raft of drawings. There's old cities, there's gardens, there's fragments of buildings. The blue background one on the middle row on the right is a drawing nearby here, which is an iPad sketch. So one of the things in terms of getting skills in drawing, I will, in a workshop, I'll teach people, I'll actually go through this particular drawing maybe and explain, I'll get the photograph of it and explain how to draw it, and we'll go through and we'll explain it. And I'll let people, you know, take 35, 40 minutes. A lot of people who are nervous about drawing are very tentative and self-conscious about their work. And that's fine to start with. And so be as self-conscious as you want, be as lacking confidence as you want. Labour the drawing, draw too many lines, overwork it, that's all fine. Take 35, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever you want to do. Then the test for you then is to redraw that in 3 minutes and set your alarm on your phone and try and draw it in 3 minutes. Because in 3 minutes, there's no time to be self-conscious. You can't think. You just got to really, what are the main shapes? What's the main story? You begin to edit very quickly about what are the key things that you're trying to draw with this building. And this is a little cottage near Sandefjord. It's actually not very well proportioned. It's actually a much wider drawing, but I drew that standing up with colouring in pencils. But my wife quite liked it. So we went back a few days later and sat down a rock about 5 meters to the right and did that version of it through there. And I'm quite happy to go back and redraw things again from different angles. And I use the different technique, which is what you like to do. And so, but the important thing is that then I ask people, okay, you've taken 3 minutes to do it. Now put all the drawings away and now draw it from memory. You can take as much time as you want. And people actually draw quite quickly from memory because you can't recall the detail, you're recalling the main argument. So this is a memory drawing. I drew on the plane flying to Amsterdam from Norway. One of the things I sort of know about myself is my visual memory is very good, and I think that's why I did architecture, because I could go to a place and have very clear recollections of it. And with this is Procreate on the iPad, and so you can just export it as a time-lapse movie. But you can see it's quite a reasonable representation of the scene. And then that's another memory drawing I did of it just a few weeks ago or late last year. And I did a workshop in my office and used this scene. It's actually not a very complex scene. It might look complex, but it's got very simple elements, a simple house on the rocks. the water and the distance, the boat in the foreground, the little jetty, you know, and the trees in the background. So they're really quite simple elements.